Suarez!
Battle for binary-based football supremacy has long since been a two-horse race, with EA's licensed FIFA branding and star names hogging the mainstream limelight. Now PES has a history almost as long as FIFA's, starting within the World Soccer roots, then onto IIS Pro. Ugh, soccer. I know. Anyway, the PES name started in the early noughties, but the Japanese release kept a firm grip on the winning 11 names throughout, and this brings us nicely onto the latest entry in 2018. Now, not the year, of course, I mean that's 2017, this is obviously football, which means you're always a year ahead. Anyway, with a whole host of new features, let's look at those.
Has anything to do with you? Massive leap! Marvellous goal! A lovely header, but really it was all about the delivery.
Well, look, it's often the timing of the jump that
Sports games regularly demonstrate the evolution over revolution ethic better than most. Normally tied into an annual update, the amount of changes possible are dictated by the time frame and team or teams that can actually work on them. From MotoGP, F1, NBA, Madden and of course FIFA, the course is always improve on what you can and do not break what works. Now that said, we see a vast increase in many facets here from Konami. New animations and control have now been added to enhance air control for chesting down balls or heading as they come along from long pings across the pitch. Shimmies and stepovers have also been a key element in PES and one of the main features that sets it aside from the competition. Now being able to have fine control of the ball while running, weaving and passing has always been its biggest strength. The more time you take with the game, the easier it becomes to hold onto the ball while you manage a long run up the wing. The way you can tap the ball ahead or use the right stick to feint the players is great, and has only been improved here with far more control and finesse possible. Now this is not only from your wealth of input choices, but also the game's vast array of motion captured animations that now include back heels, lopsided kicks, flowing ball control and the subtle wealth of motion that it achieves so well. Unlike FIFA, where runs are pretty much impossible on decent difficulty, PES succeeds with your commitment. 2017 or even 16 players will feel at home here as it instantly feels like coming home. But it is faster, more nuanced at times and will still take a few games before you get the hang of these new changes in action. Weight and momentum is all within the movement. Players are pushed off the ball, slide on wet grass, lose balance and more, which makes the action very realistic indeed. A football title needs to take into account the all-important areas that players wish to dive into. The online tournament and the esports section returns here with co-op games of varying levels and just pure one-on-one face-offs. As this review is all completed before the servers are live and the game is even out, thanks to a review copy from Konami, I cannot test that as yet, but I will update if anything significant is found or requested in the comments section below. Now, exhibition matches, create your own player, tournaments including the fully licensed Champions League are all here, and in terms of the full branded display, it is the highlight of the fully licensed title. But most likely many will while away hours as a manager and a player in the fully equipped Master League of the game. This also sees new additions over its wealth of extras last year. A new transfer system is now included, which will allow a day one update once the servers go live to shift all the players around to the correct clubs and kits after the window has closed. Pre-match interviews, pre-season tournaments and even locker room shots are all included to bolster the already rammed expanse of budget management, player morale and job security, which is now much harder to keep hold of, although some of the youth academy players now have a sense of deja vu. Yeah. You can play the game or sim as you see fit, and a typical mixed bag of music tracks will accompany the lacking menu system. The GUI overall could be adequately described as functional, never making life difficult, but certainly in need of a facelift to elevate its stature. Thankfully, the presentation of the game has taken another leap forward, thanks to the visual package on offer, and the Fox engine that powers it. Now, it's not quite a huge leap up on the Pro version though. It does support a native 4K 60 presentation, but sadly, does not look phenomenal for it. Now why, you may ask? Well, it's because it only uses the 4K geometry mode and not a total 4K buffer. Now this means that only the edges of objects are rendered with a 4K resolution, but all textures, effects, doff, motion blur, lighting, etc. are all sampled at the same 1080p resolution, as the base PS4, which renders at 1920 by 1080, as per previous entries, along with the same silky smooth updates and fast response. Now this is a waste for a sports title that would benefit the most from increasing the detail resolution over the edges, as the specular highlights and sub-pixel shimmer is largely coming from here and not the vertex points, so the base post-processed AA does little to resolve this in action, and the 4K Pro version only lightly improves on that. Worse still, it only outputs the 4K mode on a 4K screen, so 1080p players are left with the same image as base players. Now I do hope they have a day one patch lined up to resolve this. 1, to add in downsampling, and 2, to increase the base resolution to possibly 1440p or higher if possible, which would make a world of difference. Now that said, it is still a very sharp and clean game on both models, and clarity from grass, models and crowds has all been enhanced from the 2017 release. Now it also doesn't support HDR. This may or may not come in a later patch, but I wouldn't hold my breath, and it possibly won't make a huge difference anyway. Now player models are again of a general high quality, which instantly recognise faces, hairstyles and beards alike, even if the kits do not match up to the actual player teams. You get the idea. And this of course can be quickly resolved, as I covered in last year's review, by the Teams Edit function, which resolves the biggest issue quickly, allowing kits to be imported, names corrected and even voiceover fixed to match. It also nicely demonstrates that the title supports a range of texture assets from 64 by 64 pixels up to 2048 by 2048 with player kits, logos and the like, but the bigger the texture source, the less you can import. Now if you really want, you can create your own kit and use that as free advertising. Now there's an idea. Anyway, I get distracted. Skin quality is much better than last year's, as are the kits themselves, with a rudimentary physics simulation on cloth giving shorts and tops some level of movement that is backed up with the heavy reliance on normal maps and blends. A symptom of the engine design, with it favouring texture work, lighting and decals over pure geometry. Hair and beards also see a boost here, with a dithered effect apparent on the fins to simulate depth of hair, but the basic post-processed AA can miss this at times, giving heavy shimmer even at a native 4K, largely due to this only covering object edges and not details or textures. Now, crowd sources are the average level of mixed chants and reverbs, as is the stadium music. They have improved the range of pre-game intros, and this helps reduce the fatigue of them, but soon you will simply skip to the action anyway. Commentary is really starting to show its age though, with many lines present from last year's games, and repetition sets in very fast. It can also be out of sync with the action and simply turns on the excitement phrase whenever the shoot button is pressed. It can help sell the mood, but for next year I would really like to see them record larger chunks of this and mix the samples up much better within the game.
Now it's Luis Suarez. He's on his way. It's Luis Suarez! Oh, within an inch or two. Timely intervention. Aimed long and direct. Just brushed off the ball there. And it's Kane. Manolo Gabbiadini hits one! Wonderful from Manolo Gabbiadini!
In terms of its materials, they have really improved the quality from last year's effort in many areas. Shirts, socks and boots all have higher details, and they also get dirty from decals after muddy slides and tackles. 38 stadiums are created in the game, and they all differ in design and flows. Grass is much better here and more consistent than before, which sounds petty, but you spend a long time looking at it, so it really gets a mark here for improving it. Texture details are far higher and resolve much better, far nearer and further from the distance of the camera. The split between grass sections, astroturf and running tracks is far more convincing. Animation is where the game really excels though, with its IK integration enabling loose ankles to affect the player's legs as they run, or the physics integrated into all movement and collision, such as when players are struck mid-air and spin around, or pushed off the ball in a tackle in play, and even more in the slow motion replays. These look incredible, as does the way each player controls the ball when passed or punted a few yards in front to keep pace. These little touches thoroughly convince that you are watching a real game at times. Mixed in with the sheer volume of game types, stadiums, control and finesse over it all is where it shines the brightest. PES is not as easygoing as FIFA. It takes more time to get accustomed to the flow of it, the wealth of options and the freedom you have. And this means you need to stick at it with a little longer than you would on FIFA to get into it. Use the training modes, read the tips, but soon it all pays off with its satisfying depth and skill required, and is where I prefer it over the competition by a 300-yard sprint. So everything is perfect then with the title, right? Well, of course not. As with anything, there is always scope for improvement. When players are tackled, it still has the effect of rendering them stunned for a few seconds, which is frustrating at times. Fouls still feel more weighted to you than the opposition in play, making anything other than a run and dab of X a dangerous cat and mouse game with the ref and his deck of cards. The simming option in the game is also largely irrelevant. You can pretty much guarantee that if you sim the game whilst away from home, you're probably going to lose 3-0. But they would definitely need to work on this area more, because simming in their large management section is definitely an option. You don't want to play every single game. Facial animation is very, very mixed, with some half decent areas, but on the whole it's very weak and basic for modern levels, more so when the camera can linger on them for so long in pre-game sections or replays. This also helps reduce the quality of the player models, which are again an assortment of very good to very placeholder levels. Many of the non-key players are simply stock models from a bygone era, lipstick on a pig at times, now largely due to the higher quality in most of the more famous players here, mind. Now this is also true of the arm and leg movement and a lack of verts and skeletal rigs used for the players. These are all designed for the motion capture play, but more, shall we say, human movement can appear awkward at best, with clipping still being a long running issue with the title, and even FIFA suffers from this, but due to the amount of interaction it can be jarring. The lack of facial expression and small touches such as more blinking or mouth movement would help here, as would increase the rigs and polygon budget and blends. Even though the cloth movement is much better and kit contours to players better, without normal maps everywhere they would largely look like cardboard kits, and in the close-ups they need more maps to blend between and at a slower rate to improve this. Lighting is a strong point again of the game and engine. Although Fox Engine was one of the first titles to use a linear workflow within its material systems, here it is sparingly used on parts of the game. The atmospheric scattering is good in the cloudy, rainy sections, and the rain itself is much better here, with a decent depth to it as it falls and a distorted droplet on the lens. The best looking sections though come from the sunny matches as always, and highlight the excellent shadow and ambient occlusion work, which helps the ball contact with the ground and players as they slide. Now it can leave a thick black outline sometimes, but is still a welcome benefit and helps players feel more grounded in the world. Post effects is where they need to step up the game though. The heavy use of Gaussian blur mixed with a soft bloom can almost look PS2 in places, and I would prefer a more subtle use of this in play and in replays. The per object motion blur is very welcome, but needs to be altered from its 60 FPS target aperture speed, as it holds the image twice as long but is still designed for half the image time. So the samples band heavily in motion, and due to the 30 FPS replay sections in the game, the rest of the game is an unwavering 60 FPS as always though. It stands out like a sore thumb and even ruins the image quality at times when it does. Now the DOF can have really nice bokeh shapes in some of the deeper shots, and this looks excellent when it focus shifts back and forth. I hope they spend more time on an update or next year's title to improve these two areas most, along with the player models. Another minor niggle is the replay action. It can actually be too fast. It looks like speeded up motion, most likely due to how they handle it for the slow motion replays, but they do need to fix this because at certain points it looks like you're watching an old silent movie running through a football match. Also, it is a great shame that the Pro is not used more than the basic 4K edges we have here. Even dropping down to an overall 1440p across everything would help improve the shimmer across the title and the presentation on the bigger platform. Plus, add in downsampling so 1080 players can also benefit. This should be a simple patch to release quickly. Giving it in the option menu screen would be the best choice for those that prefer to stay as is, but I'm not sure why, but you never know. With the option to correct all the players' names, teams, kits being very simple, and the big strides they have made to the presentation and quality of the package as a whole, I can thoroughly recommend this to all PES players without any issues at all. and if you were not sold on last year's FIFA, then jumping over could not be done at a better time than now, as we have the best PES we have seen thus far. It still does not match the sky-high presentation and budget the big EA monster has, but in terms of capturing the feel of the beautiful game and depth in play, it can more than hold its own. This may also be the year that PC players finally get a game that stacks up to the latest console versions tested here, but I will confirm that once the title is released on PC later this year. But for now, they have a shot out of the gate first and strong, and from here, the back of the net looks as big a target as ever.
And a header! Wonderful from Manolo Gabbiadini! Surely that has won it!
And as always, if you like this or anything else I've put together on my channel or website, then please feel free to subscribe and support me by liking below, leaving your comments below. You can also follow me on Twitter. If you also like what I do, you can also support me on Patreon by hitting the link in the description below and giving any pounds or dollars you can afford. I am completely self-funded and independent and will always remain thus so. This is a review copy like I say, but I've given you an honest representation of that game and all the detail behind it. You guys and girls take care, play fast, score well, and I'll catch you on the next one.